Namaste. Welcome to this series of talks from Heart to Heart, Volume 2. These are the talks and questions and answers from the proceedings of the seminars of Sahaj Marg held during September-October 1987 at France, Madagascar and Switzerland by Pujya Shri Parthasarthi Rajgopalachari Chari Ji Maharaj. In this narration, we will cover 3 talks, 2 are very short. The first talk is titled Freedom and Love. In the physical world, we are used to this idea that compression develops power, isn't it? Compress a gas, it has more power. Compressed gas, compressed air, a spring, if you compress it, it rebounds. Matter, when it is compressed, its density, it is able to spring back. So many things, but in the human and especially the spiritually human life, it is freedom which develops power. So we need freedom. Babuji used to say, "Don't confine me, even when you wanted a sitting. Babuji, give me 10 minutes sitting." He said, "If you leave me free, then you find what I can do for you." And coming to this subject of love, there also, if you want to compress everything into a few moments or a few words and make demands, there also the charm or the splendors is lost. So there too, there must be freedom. So in the physical world, compression; in the spiritual world, which is the world of love, freedom. Thank you. Next talk is titled Individual Love. Love is an individual affair. It concerns only the lover and the beloved. Sometimes we see in these talks people say, "Let us give our hearts." This cannot be a mass sacrifice, that all of us give our hearts in one grand, like the military surrendering its weapons all together. This has to come individually for each person, you see, otherwise it would be like potatoes. We are all boiled together and all the potatoes are cooked. But human beings are not potatoes. One is cooked the moment he comes in master's presence. Instantly, he or she comes before the master. For some, a whole lifetime of exposure has no effect. So each one has to work for this, not a group effort. Group meditation, but individual love. Very often we forget this, as if we can all love the master in one effort, and all become his devotees and all become surrendered, all become merged with him. Do you know why we think like this? Because we don't want to risk our individual heart. Have you given your heart? Have you given your heart? Okay, now I can give my heart. There also we seek safety, but in the love there can be no security. That is why it is so rewarding. It is almost like a gamble. The grand gamblers in the casinos, they don't throw 1 rupee or 1 franc. They put everything they have up. I have not gambled, but I have read about gambling. Casino Royale, James Bond. So here you cannot, there are 2 reasons. One, you cannot give your heart bit by bit. Either you give it or you don't give it. So whenever a person says, "Oh, I loved him with all my heart," it is a lie. Why? With all the heart? That's not necessary to add. You can only love or not love. Now we try to give the master, first 5% of the heart, then another 5%, then third 5%. But the heart cannot be cut, so we are only intellectualizing love and loving with our brain or intellect, but not with our heart. As Babuji said, if you have surrendered and you are able to say, "I have surrendered," it is not surrender. Who is the I who says, "I have surrendered"? Similarly, if you say, "I love him with all my heart," it is still your heart. Where is the love? So, when we talk of the master and our love for the master, at the real stage of love, you should not even be conscious that you love him. That is the final stage. So, we should work towards that. Not just this, playing ping pong with the heart. So, good night. Next talk is titled Telling Myself the Truth. I will start off by speaking about food. It's always a matter of interest. What we ate yesterday, what we shall eat perhaps in an hour's time, and what we shall eat tomorrow. And the science of gastronomy is highly developed in Europe. I have found so many books of recipes, Chinese recipes, Arab recipes, Indian recipes, very expensive, beautifully illustrated books. And sometimes I wonder whether I will see that in reality on the tables where we go. It's always a great disappointment. Why I say this is not because the people who entertain us are lacking in their desire or ability to give us what we expect, but because reality never approaches its representation in material form. This was perhaps the most important teaching of my master, which I learnt with some difficulty but very easily in my spiritual life. The first disappointment was my master himself. Some of you may have read the book My Master and you would have understood my first disappointment when I met him. The disappointment was almost total because I went expecting something and what I saw did not match that expectation in even the smallest detail. Fortunately for me, I looked at his eyes and I lost myself. If I had not lost myself then, I would have been eternally lost. So it was necessary to lose myself then. When I looked into his eyes, so find myself after that in greater and greater degree, and one day I hope I shall find myself as I am, which is what he would have made me by then. Now this is the problem with reality. Now coming to the cement law speech of Sister Angela and the gastronomic art in Europe, what is it that disappoints us or makes us afraid of speaking? There are many people who want to entertain us, any one of us, but they are afraid, they are shy, they have something at home which they can cook and offer to us with their heart, but they want to create an effect. They must have the right table, the right cutlery, the right crockery, while the food is the least important thing. Now, at least if my hostess would allow me to take away the plates and the nice stainless ware, it would be some compensation. But they don't think of the food, they think of all this nonsense, the setting. And then it is so beautifully set that we are afraid of spilling something or spoiling the tablecloth. I know that I have been at some tables where by accident if you drop a spoon on the floor, it is a major tragedy. And of course, if you spill the soup on the beautiful satin tablecloth, it is almost a massacre of the innocents. It happened to me once. It was very early in 1948, I think 1949, when I came to Europe as a boy. I had to wear a suit to go to dinner and I was not accustomed to this sleeve business. Even every time I moved my hand, the sleeve was going round with me and I upset something. That poor lady who called me to dinner, this was in Yugoslavia. The tablecloth was from the last century, from her great grandmother, specially laid out for my appreciation. Now, when I upset a cup of coffee on it, you can imagine the tragedy. Immediately, they rushed for some in those days. They had this sawdust from the wood. The food was forgotten, the guests were forgotten, everything was forgotten. The tablecloth had to be saved. This is the sort of thing that happens when we do something for effect. What is the use of forgetting the guest and thinking of the tablecloth? Of course, it would be very uncharitable to comment on the food because all one's effort has gone into the table, the cutlery, the crockery, the napery, and the precise mathematical position of each item on the table. Where is the time to think of the food? At least in those days they cooked. Now it is even worse. Most of the things come out of tins and bottles. But unfortunately, we think even less of food today. That is why when you go to simple people, simple houses, poor people, you enjoy the food much more. They have no table to think about, they have no cutlery, they have no tablecloth, and therefore they think of the food. And even if it is only one carrot and half a tomato and two potatoes, they cut up what they have, put into a pot, do something with it, all the time thinking of the guest who is coming. The food tastes delicious. All of you, those of you who have been to Shahjahanpur, had this experience when they were blessed by an invitation to eat with the master. His dining room had a mud floor, a salam movement la. This was not a dining room at all. It was a contraption, some room converted to dining. My master believed that there where we ate was the dining room, not the other way around. Similarly, where we sleep in the bedroom, not that I must sleep in the bedroom. So this is one invertendo incidentally, that today we are compelled to do certain things in certain places, whereas originally they became that place because we did something there. Now this is a very important point to understand. It's not just a flippant example. Because by this gross misunderstanding of a place and the function associated with it, and by taking it to its ultimate absurd extent, we have lost the ability to pray, because we think prayer must be only in temples or churches or mosques, and therefore we cannot pray at home. We cannot pray in the office. We cannot pray even in the toilet. Why not pray in the toilet? What is wrong with the toilet that we should not pray there? Is God not there? So you see, by associating a place, food must be cooked in the kitchen and guests must be received in the drawing room. This custom has cut life into pieces, and we have transferred it to our brain that unless we can have a guest for whom we can have the table made and the cutlery laid and good food prepared, we won't even invite him to eat. Therefore, our invitations have become too artificial. We don't feed a man when he wants food, we invite him when we are ready to invite. I assume sometimes that even in the husband and wife relationship, this thing has come, that I will not offer love when he needs it or she needs it, but only when I am ready to love. Don't you think this is a crazy situation? Now suppose my master has said, I will give you a transmission when I am ready for it, or I will liberate you only when I think it is right, or if he had said, I only deal with saints, not with sinners, because I am a saint myself. Suppose Babuji had said like that, where would we be? You know of the miracle of Christ feeding the multitude with 2 loaves and 5 fishes. It is not a miracle in the Christ performed something which I cannot do or you cannot do. He had the courage, the love for his people, and most important, the faith in God, that if he used those 2 loaves and 5 fishes, which was what God had provided for him that day, they shall not go hungry. It was not that their stomachs were filled. I mean, it is stupid to think that you can feed a multitude with 2 loaves and 5 fishes, but in some miraculous way, every crumb that he broke out of the bread and gave to a person, it filled his stomach. It removed his hunger. So, 2 things we must have: love for our people, faith in God, in my case, faith in my master, that by depending on him, anything I give you will fulfill your need for the moment, even if it is a bit of stone. There is a parallel story of Lord Krishna where he is in the house of his beloved or somewhere like that, and suddenly a whole host of rishis, that is great spiritual people, come. Now he and his beloved, they have finished dinner, all the vessels have been and even been cleaned and everything is put in the proper place. And the senior most Rishi who has come in known for his anger, he was called Durvasa. His curses are famous. He is not known for blessings. Now this poor girl, Krishna's lover, was miserable. What to do? I have nothing to eat, nothing to give them. Krishna said, don't worry. Show me the vessels in which you cooked your food. Fortunately for her in those days, there were no washing machines because it would have clinically washed everything. When Krishna examined the vessel, he found one bit of rice, a single grain of cooked rice in one vessel. He took it and ate it, and then he called the rishis and said, how about some dinner? The miracle was when Krishna ate one grain of rice, their stomachs were all full. They were embarrassed, you see. The Lord himself was inviting them to dinner and they could not eat. They had to beg his pardon. No, Lord, forgive me, today I am not hungry. That is how he saved his beloved. This is also the secret of offering prasad to the Master, because when he takes a bit of it, all that we get is an atomic part of that prasad. Yet it fulfills us physically, spiritually, in all ways. This is the secret of prasad. Therefore, prasad should not be eaten in handfuls. The Gita says that prasad, taken with devotion, removes all diseases, misery from the system, not because it was cooked well or from a Chinese recipe book, but because it was offered to the Lord with devotion and love by the devotee, and in accepting it, he blesses it. When he blesses it, his spirit flows into it. Therefore, it becomes prasad. It may be chocolates, it may be biscuits, it may be anything. Now similarly, when we have to speak, what is the difficulty? I cannot understand it. The difficulty is precisely this. How can I create an effect in the minds of those who are listening to me that I am a good speaker, that I said something wonderful, that next time they will say, you must speak again. I am thinking of these things. We have no time to think of the subject. So it is like the wife in the kitchen who does not think of the food but thinking of the cutlery and the crockery, imagining very foolishly that the guest is impressed by the Nowadays, we also see that in our studies, we have very ornate desks and tables and lighting equipment. Very expensive stuff. Danish furniture, German leather upholstery, Finnish chairs, Ormulo clocks, and things like that from the past generation. But nobody studies. It is too good to be studied in. But when you are a student and you had a broken chair and a broken table, most uncomfortable, and when the electricity failed, one candle was enough to make us study. So what is it we wanted then? Light. What is it we want from people? Not your $200 suits or $500 suits or the latest Lanvin creations for women, but the heart. Now we leave behind the heart and the present ourselves like some of these modeling girls. What do you get? So, in every situation, it is the heart that we want. Now, Angela said something very important. I don't know if she recognized it herself about speaking and about writing the journal. I have always found it easier to speak than to write. Here, I should perhaps not reveal a secret. Why is it so? Because when we speak, the listener listens. Some of them don't even listen. And having heard it through this ear, most of them let it out through this ear and walk away. You can say with great confidence that you can reveal the greatest secret, and most people don't hear it. But when we write it down, the person is likely to read it again and again, and we are afraid of it. We are afraid not of somebody else reading it, but of ourselves reading it after a few years and of being shocked. This I was 3 years ago. Now why should I be shocked by what I was 3 years ago? I don't know. Why should I be worried or ashamed of what I was? If I am not worried and shocked by what I am today, surely it is more important to know what I am than to know what I was. This same fear reveals itself when we speak, because if you speak from the mind, we can tell lies to others as easily as to ourselves. It serves no purpose, but if you want to speak from the heart will only tell the truth, and that we don't want to tell. Forget the rest. We don't want to tell ourselves the truth. This I am. I don't want to know myself. So it is a fact that I cannot speak of any truth unless I am willing to accept that truth. The shock of that truth, the frightfulness of that truth, myself. It is like a woman who doesn't want to look in the mirror for fear of what it shows. Some people even go to the extent of breaking the mirror in their frustration. What can the mirror do, poor thing? It only shows what you are. So if you want to change it, keep the mirror and change your face. Better still, keep the mirror and change your heart, and then you will find how much beauty comes into your face, not because of the cosmetic industry, but because of the divine presence now shining through you. This is the secret. So unless we are open with ourselves, truthful with ourselves, we cannot speak. I am not talking of the political speeches and the professorial lectures that teachers give in schools and colleges. They are only learning by heart and vomiting it out again somewhere else. But if you want to speak from the heart, it requires enormous courage. It requires the courage of saying, I am this, but I don't care a damn who knows about it. Because who is it who should be ashamed of himself or herself, he or she herself? You see, suppose a woman dresses very beautifully and everybody says she looks beautiful except the one whom she wants to say it. What is the use? She puts on an artificial smile, goes around the party until her heart is breaking. Then she goes into her bedroom, takes off that expensive dress which she wore for her lover, which he never looked at. He was thinking of somebody else. And that beautiful dress for which she paid the couturier $100 or $1,000, she tears to a piece in her frustration, stamps her feet on it and falls on her bed and weeps. Now, why did she wear that dress in the first place? Put on the perfume, look beautiful. Not that the mirror should reflect her beauty or for other persons at the party to call her beautiful. One loving glance from her beloved would have been enough. It didn't come, so the whole evening is a disaster. Perhaps had she prepared her heart instead of her body, the lover would have recognized it. So the same mistake she makes, we also make. We go to the beloved all artificially dressed up, hair coiffed, lipstick, rogue, and what happens? He wants to embrace his beloved, but she says, don't touch my hair, don't touch my cheeks, don't come near me. I don't want my hair disarranged. I don't want my beautiful dress crushed. And he says, what will I do with a fashion model in a glass case? I came for your heart and I find a mannequin. So whether you are preparing food for your guest or your husband, or whether you are preparing yourself for your beloved, and most important, when you are trying to prepare yourself for your God, it is the heart which must receive all your attention. The rest is unimportant. The body is only a covering for the heart, like the seed is covered by the fruit, so that it may be protected but not hidden. It should not be like money put in a bank vault and made unavailable to anybody else. Now, in any of this situation, if you look to the heart and prepare it, you will find that life becomes a blissful existence. And then there is no problem. You can be as poor as you are and still be successful hostess, because even if you give 2 peanuts to the man who comes to see you, he is happy. You go to God. You go with your tattered clothes, but with a pure heart, He accepts you as His own lover. So this secret we have to rediscover. And this is what my Divine Master has made possible for us to try and easily achieve. That is why Sahaj Marg meditation is on the heart. This is why the cleaning of the Sahaj Marg system is of the heart. That is where we put the divine light within the heart. That is where the transformation occurs of the heart. And when this is ready, we are the brides of the Master. We don't need satin dresses, diamond necklaces, sapphire rings, all this nonsense. Everything is forgotten because he looks at nothing except the heart of the devotee. So, whether we are going to speak before an audience or cook for the Master or just go to him with our love, always put your heart into it. Keep the intellect at home. Don't forget that. Keep the intellect at home. Take your heart, and life is a blissful thing, a fruitful thing, and a transforming existence. Thank you for listening. Here we conclude these 3 talks. In the next narration, we will cover the next talk titled Independence with Submissiveness. Thank you once again.